Welcome to the Adult Table, a podcast where we sit down with people in the SASE and our STEM community. We set the virtual table to bring in a diverse set of guests to engage in a casual conversation on their professional career and life.
With this podcast, we hope that we can bridge the gap between the hierarchy involved with growing up. We can redefine what it means to be able to figuratively sit at the adult table.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Jason Chin.
And I'm your other co-host, Jenny Chung.
Today, in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month in May, we are bringing on two new friends from the Mental Health Initiative in SASE, Aishwarya Mantagani and Alex Hattori. You may have heard Alex from our last episode talking about his gap year traveling to places like Colombia, Australia, and New Zealand.
And before we get started with this episode, this is a content warning that we will be discussing topics around mental health that may include topics involving depression, anxiety, suicide ideation, and self-harm. So please listen at your own discretion. Thank you for joining us today, Aishwarya and Alex. It's great to see you again. Can you give the listeners a brief introduction of yourself and what you've been up to these past days?
Hi guys, my name is Aishwarya. I am a senior at Texas A&M University. I'm graduating this May, and I'm coming back again after the summer for another semester for my master's. So that's what I do for school. And then outside of that, I guess I like to draw and paint, and I like watching murder mysteries and TV shows like that. For SASE involvement, I got involved with SASE when I was a freshman in college. I joined SASE TAMU's collegiate committee, so it's kind of the officers in training. And then from there, I moved up the ranks, became president. And then this year, I've been South RC. Next year, I'm going to be SRC for the South region.
Ooh.
And my name is Alex. I graduated from UCSB in 2021 with a chemical engineering degree. I got started with SASE my freshman year there and was just a general member my first year, and then eventually went up to being a president and a regional conference director for my senior year. I am currently in my second term as an RMR on the SASE West collegiate team, and my current, place in life is a continued gap year. So I technically haven't gone over a year yet, but I see it going over a year after graduation, or I guess now it's been a couple years. So I worked a little bit after graduation, and now I'm kind of in this travel seasonal job phase of my life. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. And so the reason why we brought you both on is that you guys are both committee members for the SASE Mental Health Initiative. So could you go and tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So just to give a quick overview, as everyone knows, there's quite a few initiatives. Firstly, Adult Table Podcast. There's also the Science Initiative, Sister Chapter, and then the Mental Health Initiative. So the motivation behind this initiative is that we wanted to give a community for our fellow SASE people so that we can put attention on mental health, and especially with COVID and things like that, I feel like there's been more of an emphasis on making sure you have a good mental health. And so our initiative is really focused on creating a safe space and drawing attention to that in a positive manner.
Yeah, so like the last 2 years, the Mental Health Initiative we've mostly done like these virtual discussions. So somewhere around like 4-ish a year. And we kind of focus on different aspects of mental health. So we've had discussions about burnout, boundaries, independence, core values, self-improvement, a couple other topics in mental health. And this is just in general to create awareness for mental health. As Aishwarya said, create a safe space for people to talk about their thoughts, and to kind of bring this idea of like a caring support network to SASE. Most people in SASE, although there's a lot of post-grad people in SASE now, are like in college, and we know that that's like a highly stressful time, and you're transitioning into more of an adult, which the Adult Table Podcast, of course, helps with, but there's lots of struggling that happens, and so we'd like to be a support system for that.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I'm really glad this initiative has continued to grow. I remember Magna and David kind of talked about it before in our last year's episode. But it's really cool that you guys are continuing to be that support system as kind of like the SASE community is growing differently. People are moving in from COVID times to being in person, but still having a lot of those same issues and having a good space for that. But for you two, like I know you mentioned being volunteers, being on the SASE team, but also doing other things in your life. So how did you guys like decide that you want to be a part of it, take on another task and responsibility to put on these different events or just be part of the planning team?
Yeah, so mental health for me, like I had an emotionally privileged childhood. I have zero childhood trauma. And I didn't really have any kind of mental health journey until after the pandemic hit. And that's really when the SASE mental health initiative started to like become a more active thing as well. And so I was kind of naturally drawn to it because I was struggling with my own mental health issues. So joining that was a way for me to draw attention to a focus for mental health for myself, as well as trying to connect with other people, not necessarily having the same issues, but like going through issues themselves and then being able to join a community that has a more direct focus on that. And it has really helped. Like being a part of that initiative, I'm able to like place more consciousness on like my own mental health progress, and I've been able to watch myself like progress from where I was to where I am now. So that's one of the most exciting parts I find about being in this initiative is that like I saw my own progression as I was, doing this thing for mental health, for which was for other people, but also myself. Yeah.
All right. I guess for me, I didn't know that this existed until the retreat that happened in August. And so whenever David went up and talked about it, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I liked the idea of it. And I think I was really just swept up in the whole excitement of retreat. And so I was like, I think it'd be cool to get involved in something. And I feel like for me personally, I place a lot of stress on myself. I used to have health problems associated with being stressed out. Like I had acid reflux and gastritis, and like a lot of my family friends thought I was bulimic because of the health issues I was going through. And so from high school into college, I started working on that, working on my stress levels, and then also just becoming a lot more relaxed of a person. And that was something I've always been aware of. And then on top of that, talking with a lot of my friends, typical deep, meaningful conversations at night, that sort of thing. We talk about things, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I guess I do have a negative response to certain things. And so I started becoming more aware of my mental health. And I feel like during COVID, I started putting in more effort to sort of become a better person. And I still haven't gone through any typical proper steps in terms of a diagnosis or therapy or things like that, but I've been doing a lot of stuff on my own, and it's always something that I'm working towards in terms of bettering my mental health. So whenever David talked about it at retreat, I was like, I think this is what I want to get involved in. And so it's been a good experience for me.
I'm really glad that through like this position, I know like we talk a lot about like states volunteers and making sure that not only are you helping the community and like you love the community and you want to be a part of growing it, but that you're also having some sort of like personal growth and like learning more about yourself. So I think that's like really cool that you're able to achieve both of those in being part of like the mental health initiative. And just like as a general statement too, I appreciate that you guys are kind of open to talking about kind of your journeys with mental health. And I know like sometimes it might be like a little too personal and stuff. So I think it's really nice to kind of hear those stories and kind of be relatable for people who may be listening or maybe just help in motivating people to start thinking more about like their mental health journey and stuff. So Aisha, I kind of want to ask you, like you mentioned that you're kind of going through this process and trying to figure things out on your own. So like how has that progression been for you? Like where have you been going for those resources, or has it been more of like just like an internal dialogue with yourself?
I think it kind of depends on what I'm working on. So in terms of being stressed out about things, I really feel like that's something that I kind of talk through myself with. And I feel like I also kind of listen to other conversations that I've heard. My parents, typical Asian, they moved here from India. So I was born here, and my dad is from a village. And so as a kid, I'd be stressed out over school. I'd sit in my study room and cry. And my dad would be like, in the nicest way possible, he'd be like, why are you crying? Like, you have everything you need. You have a roof over your head and you have food, and school is stressful, but it's okay. And so hearing how he puts things into perspective and just thinking about that, that's sort of what I think about. And also I think about how things in the least depressing way possible, like don't really matter. Like if I don't do well on an exam right now, who even cares? Like, is it really gonna affect me 20 years from now? No. So why am I so stressed out? So I don't sort of brush aside my issues, but I sort of try to go through an internal conversation with myself of why am I stressed out? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? And really getting to the root of anything. So not just school stuff, but anything else. So I really like to deconstruct my stress and try to figure out every single process or every single thing that's stressing me out. And then from there, just kind of rationalizing it, which I don't know if it's the most healthy way, but I feel like I've become significantly less stressed over time. And I feel like whenever I have conversations with my friends about anything else, and of course, this isn't something that like I'm not a therapist, but if I'm talking with someone, sometimes like my friends do like to hear what I have to say too, because I feel like it helps put things into perspective for them. And so I think because my friends like how I do things and it seems to be working for me, that's kind of been something I've been sticking to. And then in terms of some other stuff like being more motivated and things like that, I'll sometimes Google things, sometimes watch YouTube videos, just shop around online and see what's up and then figure out what I like and go from there. So it really just depends on what I'm looking at.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think like the main thing is that different things work for different people, whether they're trying to figure out how to maintain stress levels or work through certain issues. It's just like whatever works for one person may not work for another person, right? And also the thing with friends thing, it's like, yeah, it's nice to have an outlet to talk and like just to get other perspectives on things because sometimes like I could personally be like blowing things like totally like making things more dramatic, right? And so it's just like, okay, like logically, like what is actually going on? And then like several years down the line, it doesn't really matter as much. Like I always think it back to like high school where I'm like, wow, everything I did in high school really didn't matter. So like things now, it's like, okay, like things that happened in college or whatever. I mean, it was significant, but like it wasn't that big of an issue, right, in that point in time versus like what I'm doing now. So relatable.
Oh yeah, I'm so dramatic and I feel like being around my friends, they've all become more dramatic too. So I feel like I have to bring all of us down back to earth because they learned from my ways and now we're all a mess. So it's been helpful for everyone.
Well, it's good to have also like, that support group too, where it's like, okay, it's like fine to be unhinged every now and then, but you need that like anchor to bring you back down every now and then. So but I guess also going from that, so you were talking about your experiences of mental health from, before and now. I'm kind of just curious as to how your progression of maybe your perspective on mental health, like what your idea of mental health was growing up, and then how it's progressed to what it is now. I'm kind of curious on both your perspectives on that because Alex, you mentioned like the way that you grew up was different than other people. So like just curious like what your perspectives are on that.
Yeah, like I said, I had one of the most emotionally privileged childhoods that anyone could have. Like my parents were like fostered whatever kinds of whatever I needed. Like, and not I'm not talking specifically about money. I mean like specifically like my mom's a super mom, my dad's a super dad. Like they're perfect people and they have a great relationship. And I've constantly in my life been surrounded by people who I believe have very good values. And that's made it very easy for me to become the person I am today, which I am now able to say I see as a very good person. I like to say that. Um, yes, I was stressed like a lot growing up because like overachiever high school, right? Like I was an engineering major in college and like I had all this stuff happen for me and I was having all these like great academic successes and that of course demands like a lot of work. I had never been burnt out until after the pandemic. So like my life growing up until my senior year of high school, I had all of the factors in life that made it so that I could take whatever kinds of stress pressure did to me, right? Like in my mind, I was able to do all that stuff I did because I had that emotional rest aspect in my life. There's one thing I saw online that said like, oh, there's like 7 kinds of rest and you need all these to be like a fulfilled person. In my mind, I kind of lump those together really into just physical rest and emotional rest. Most people like don't really realize that they need emotional rest. And that looks very different for each individual person. And in my life growing up, I just happened to have that because of the people that were around me. And when the pandemic came around and I became really lonely, I had to realize that like the same amount of like work now was not just stress and it was burnout. And for the people that don't know the difference between that, I'll just try to explain it really quickly because I didn't understand the difference until senior year of college. When you're stressed, you're like over engaged, your mind is very active, you have like, you know, it's physically tolling, you have lower energy. You're kind of like there's like a sense of urgency, you're like panic or something, and you're like needing to do all this stuff, and your mind's super active. But when you get to a burnout point, it's like almost the complete opposite response in your body and mind. Like you're disengaged from things, you're kind of like helpless, you have no motivation. It's emotionally tolling more than it is physically tolling, which feels like very different for people. And like, you know, you can get as much physical rest as you can, but it's not going to help. And like that's just you're just going down a rabbit hole at that point, right? So like when I became burnt out, then I was like, oh, I have to actually make a more conscious effort about how my, I don't know, soul gets fulfilled and how I live my life, right? You have to be conscious about these things that I just kind of took for granted before. So that's how my idea of mental health really shifted because I didn't understand. I didn't really like. I knew what mental health was. I didn't really understand what you have to do as an individual to address mental health until I had mental health problems. So that was really a big shift in my mind, like not even knowing what burnout was or not even knowing what depression was until I actually felt those things. And it's really hard to explain that to someone that hasn't felt that before. And I guess like, I don't know, I guess I could keep going on a rabbit trail about other things I did to then get out of depression. But I don't know, I'll pass it off to Aishwarya for that question. I think it was like, what was your change in opinions about mental health growing up versus now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, mental health hasn't always been a taboo. I guess for some people growing up, it is a taboo, like, oh, you can't talk about how you're sad, you can't talk about this or that. Coming from a traditional-ish Indian household, my dad is super duper spiritual, not religious. The difference between the two, he's just very focused on like yoga, breathing exercises, meditation, and things like that. So growing up, it's always been an emphasis on meditate and focus on your thoughts, do yoga to slow your mind down and things like that. So I've always been in an environment where my parents, or at least my dad, is very cognizant of mental health. But then also on the flip side, I think because of those coping mechanisms, my dad was very like, oh, like you do all of that, so you should be fine. Like there's no other issues. Like you don't have to worry about anything because you're taking the time to do this. And so I think for me, it was this weird situation where I am an only child and I always heads with my dad, especially because we're very similar. And so we'd butt heads a lot, and my parents had high expectations of me, but then they'd also expect me to be doing all of the traditional like meditation, yoga, and things like that. So they're like, you should be calm, you should be fine. Like, I don't get why you're so stressed out. So it was okay to talk about it, but then it would be like, why are you stressed out? Because you're supposedly putting in all of the work and effort. And I think growing up in that sort of household or that environment, it was weird because I felt like I was allowed to talk about mental health, but I wasn't allowed to have negative feelings because I was supposedly addressing them. And so that was one of the root causes for why I was so stressed out all the time. It's because I was like, I don't know how to deal with it. I think I'm dealing with it, but I'm not actually dealing with it. And so I think that as I've gotten older, I've realized that those methods and those things that I do are just ways to slow down my mind. But unless I actually sit there and go through the process of, for example, like, why am I stressed out? I'm not actually going to get anywhere. I'm just going to slow down my thought process for a bit, and then I'm going to go come out of my meditation or my yoga, and I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm done with that. Now I have to go back to getting every single thing done. And then I go back to being stressed out. And so I think I grew up in an environment where I've always been cognizant of it, but as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at dealing with any negative thoughts and emotions because I've realized that whatever I was doing was just one step of the huge process. I don't know if I answered that, but yeah.
No, I think you did a pretty good job answering it. Yeah. I want to talk about like burnout too, from what Alex addressed, because I know that, well, we're all SASE volunteers, so I'm sure we've all dealt with like a lot of stuff going on. Plus, like, in addition to that, with school and like work and that sort of thing, well, I mean, Alex did talk about the definition between like, the difference between burnout and stress. Because I feel like sometimes it's hard to figure out which one is which, but also how to know that you're in it and how to address it. I think it's a big thing for a lot of people. Personally, like I've been through burnout as well. I'm sure Jason, you as well too, like when you're in school. But I feel like for me, I'm still struggling with like how to go about it, right? Like how to get out of burnout or how to make sure I don't go through that again. Because I'm also the type of person that also will try to do all of these things at once and load up all these responsibilities. And especially with COVID, right? From the work from home and that sort of thing, because you can just easily work a lot or take on all these things. So you're like, okay, like I have nothing else to do, right? So I'm just curious as to both your perspectives on that and how you dealt with it, if you have personal experiences with burnout in the past. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So stress, active mind, physically tolling, burnout, deactivated mind, emotionally tolling. When I became burned out, which was senior year of high school, like after I had, been forced to move away from college, live at home, not be around my friends, got super lonely. I'm not sure exactly if like how to distinguish between where I was burnt out versus when I got depressed, because that was mainly because I was lonely. But I will say that like to get out of depression, and probably this would apply to getting out of burnout, one of the most important things is to understand how your mind works. There's this podcast that I had been recommended by my therapist. Oh yeah, therapy was a huge freaking help, by the way. Like that was an amazing help. Like, so I was depressed for like a year and a half, almost 2 years. And then I did therapy for about 5 months, and then it was just gone. Like I just totally, like over that 5 month period, it was gradually going away. And at the end of the 5 months, when I was like, okay, now I can stop therapy, it was like, now I don't even have any of that stuff anymore. Like it's phenomenal. I can't even comprehend like how much of a change that was for me. But one of the things that therapy helped me do is understand my mind more, understanding specifically the things that for me are emotional rest. So like when I was burnt out, and I was in college and still doing a bunch of work, like sometimes when you're stressed, getting into a mindset where you can do more work helps. That does, in my mind, that doesn't apply at all for burnout. More work or trying to get more productive or anything along those lines, like is just going to make you go the opposite direction to get more burnt out. And it's not like you just need to stop doing all work either. Just giving yourself physical rest or like time away from whatever was stressing you, that doesn't necessarily help at all either. You really need to understand how to refresh and reset yourself. And that's going to be different for every person. And I think like this could be a probably separate discussion that I could go on a tangent for a while, but like understanding what your core values are and what like, I guess like feeds your soul, and then the kinds of things you can do, whether that's like social activity or an alone activity or whatever it is that like makes you feel emotionally fulfilled. That's the stuff that's going to help with things like burnout and depression. And that was a really long journey for me. Like that was a 5 month journey for me with the help of a therapist that's like trying to do those sorts of things. So that's what I would say to like how to address burnout. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I still kind of struggle between towing the line between being stressed and burnt out. One of my first experiences with burnout or my first experience in college with being burned out was in sophomore year. I was an officer for SASE. I just picked up my CS minor. And so I was taking 19 hours both semesters. And this was during COVID, which Jenny, you mentioned, like during COVID, you take on a lot more responsibility. So I was like, yeah, I have time. So I picked up a CS minor, started taking 19 hours. I was a SAFE officer, and then I was in research and doing a bunch of other stuff. And there's this one week where basically because we wanted to put together some huge online event for SACE. We planned this trivia night, and the trivia night, I stayed up super late the night before making the brackets and assigning teams and setting up the Discord channel and doing all this stuff. And then that same weekend, I had 3 different comp sci projects due and a bunch of things all on my plate. And I remember after trivia night, it went great. But after trivia night, I just got in bed and I cried for hours. And I was like, I don't know like what's going on because I felt like at that time I'd there were other instances where I had even more on my plate, but I think in that moment in time, I really wanted that trivia night for SASE to go really well. And so on top of just having things on my plate, I put this huge emotional pressure on myself. And because it was COVID, I wasn't really interacting with people. I was kind of alone in my room. And that was one of the first times that I was like, I need to deal with this better because leading up to this point in time, I at least would go see my friends, or even if I was stressed with other stuff, it wasn't COVID, so I wasn't as isolated. So over the past few years, I've really tried to make or pay attention to what I have on my plate and really try to figure out like what emotional how much of myself have I attached to the success of this? Because I don't know about y'all, but I'm a big like academic validation person or just like task validation kind of person. And so I really had to focus on, do I really need to be doing this? Is this something that will really benefit me and others? And again, right, trying to figure out why I'm so stressed out over something. I'm a big list person, so I love to make my little to-do lists and figure out what's going on and doing things like that. And so I think with me and burnout, I think every time I take something on, I have to have a serious conversation with myself and evaluate whether or not I want to do something. Because now that I'm a senior and now that I'm done with my CS minor, like, why did I do that? I didn't need to do it, but my dad wanted me to do it. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then I was miserable for 2 years and other things like that. And I feel like for me with burnout, I just really have to evaluate what's going on, make sure that what I'm doing is okay. And sometimes I feel like burnout is inevitable, especially in college. I feel like end of the semester, final runs, like I feel like every college student is always burnt out at that point in time. But I feel like the way to really address it is just keep checking in on yourself, keep making sure you're okay, and then having a support system is so great, especially if there's other people that are in the same boat as you. I feel like my roommates and I love to check in with each other. We love to pull each other away. Like every week we'll have a movie night or something like that where it's, we're a little community. We try to check in on each other. And I know during COVID that was so hard, but again, COVID raised the awareness of mental health issues. And I feel like going from then to now, most people that I know, and myself included, like we're so aware of how we're feeling, we're so aware of burnout, and we try to make sure that we're act as like a little support system and look out for each other. I think that's so important nowadays.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, both of you. I think like you can definitely see like in the SACE community or just maybe college peers that burnout is like very common, and it's just kind of normalized that you're just like need to take on all these different things, like having a minor like that or having extracurriculars, and like it really stacks up. And it, at least for me, sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, in comparison, other people are doing more or other people are doing the same and they're not feeling certain ways, but it's not necessarily just like the number of tasks, but just like how you're handling it at that moment or other things that are going on. So I know you guys like both kind of mentioned ways that you started to address those issues in your life, or going out to seek help or seek out like just conversations with friends. Alex, I know you mentioned that the 5, 6 months of therapy were really helpful. So I was curious to learn a little more about like what that journey was like in the beginning, how you felt about it. Like, were you initially like concerned or anything, or like hesitant? Like, how was that whole journey for you?
Yeah, so I became depressed sometime towards the end of senior year of college, which was after being lonely, living away from friends for a number of months, and taking on a lot of stuff that led to burnout, which otherwise wouldn't have led to burnout if I had my other life avenues to like fulfill myself, right? And then that lasted for a while. And then after graduation, I had moved to Colorado. And in Colorado, I no longer became lonely because then I met like a lot of really good friends that I clicked with very well and had the same values as me, and they were mental health conscious, and it was really great to be with them. But I still, I don't know if self-medicated is the word, because I didn't really take any medications or anything or like substances, but like I basically self-medicated my depression and did that for like a good year. And after that point, I had continually realized, or not continually realized, but I began to realize like, wow, my emotions are not, they're not steady at all. Like my up until then, my first 20 21 years of life, I've been an incredibly emotionally stable person. And then I wasn't at all anymore. And there was so many other things that just kind of tagged along with that. Lots of diet problems. Like I couldn't get myself to eat to the extent that like my body no longer like gave me like the stomach growls or like hunger. Like it just gave me jaw pain and headaches instead. Cause it was like I don't know, in my mind, that was like a withdrawal symptom from hunger or something. Like my body was like, oh, so you're not listening to your stomach. Maybe we should give you some like headaches or something or jaw pain to get you to eat. Like that was where my diet was. I wasn't like brushing my teeth. I wasn't showering. My hygiene was awful. Like there was a lot of things that I like had started to build up that really were not working, that I had to realize like I'm not doing this right. Like I can't self-medicate. I need help. So then I went to I started therapy, and for me it wasn't really like a difficult process to find someone that I clicked with. Like the first person that I went to talk to, that's the person I stayed with. I just went on some like generic website, like, I don't know, therapy.com, psychology.com, whatever it was, and like looked at bios of these therapists that were nearby because I didn't really want to go far. And I wanted like an in-person therapy session. And I saw one person's bio that like had focused, rather than on what he's like done as a therapist, that focused on his like personal experiences and wanting to then associate that with, or like connect that with someone to help them. And that's what I really enjoyed about that person's bio. So I then went to talk to them, and they helped me a ton. That whole therapy process, like, yeah, that made me undepressed in 5 months, which is, I think, like a relatively fast time for a lot of people. Probably for me, that's because like really I just had these like specific issues that I needed to address that came up because of being lonely and then the self-medicating thing. But for other people, I know that like therapy is something they do like continually because they have a lot of like, you know, like childhood things. Like those are things that often like impact who you are. And then learning about yourself, like it's kind of a constant journey rather than just like this little thing that you need to get out of your life. And so that can be a very different process. Like therapy can look very different for different people. For me, it was just like a quick fix. And in my mind, like a 5 month thing is a quick fix because before that I had been, you know, a year to year and a half of depression getting worse. Right. And so that's really how my therapy journey went. And then it was it's now like, it's almost been a year now that I've no longer been depressed, because it was last June that I was like, okay, I'm ready to stop doing therapy. And I'm like an emotionally stable person again, like ready to engage and do what I want to do and like find out what I like in life. So yeah, that's kind of how that journey went for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Alex. I know for finding therapists, like from what I've heard from my friends as well, like it's different for everyone. Sometimes you have to do a little shopping around to find a good fit. But I'm glad that it worked out for you in terms of you find the first person that you looked up and it worked out. And yeah, like I don't know, I it's mixed for a lot of people. You know, some people I think only have access to those virtual ones. I don't know if yours was like in person or something like that. There are some in-person ones, but then even with people's like insurance, it's like different for everyone. So for those, I guess, listening, if you're interested in I guess finding those resources, I think we will be putting together a doc for some things. I know specifically for POC mental health resources, there's some pretty useful websites out there that will help you find certain therapists for intersectionality of identity as well. So that's a good point that you brought up. And then I guess in terms of I guess other mental health resources and stuff like that, for those people that are like, I guess, aren't yet ready, or because I think finding a therapist also is like, or acknowledging that you need therapy is like a pretty big step in the process itself. Like what are some other resources out there that you guys would recommend, I guess, people looking into, besides like, because I know you guys are building the community aspect right here in SASE for the mental health initiative, but are there any other things that you would recommend for people to do or to look into, just as like a first step into, you know, starting that process?
I think on my end, I think it's clear that I'm not ready to go into therapy, or that's not something I'm looking to do right now. But I know if you're a college student, typically there's always a mental health office, or they have some sort of school counseling that you can sort of dip your toe in and kind of get started. I know for my university, they have a couple free sessions, and it kind of depends on the university on how good they are. And then I know for me, I did talk to my insurance, and you can sort of get information on people that are covered, or you can go onto the website, depending. I have like Blue Cross Blue Shield, and so you can go on a website and then you can put in your information, and then they'll tell you who's covered and who's not covered. And so there's stuff like that. that you can look at. And then also, I know for some people, sometimes it's helpful to start with group therapy, depending on the person, because then they don't feel as alone. And that's something that they'll feel like, okay, like I'm kind of getting used to talking to my feelings, but I know for some other people, they prefer to just have one-on-one because they don't want other people hearing about their issues. But I guess from the college student perspective, if you check out your health center, they typically have a couple of free sessions that I know that, at least for my university, it's okay. And some of my friends have tried it, and some of them like it, and some of them don't. And again, as Jenny was saying, therapy is kind of like a toss-up. It depends on who you're with and things like that.
Yeah, I definitely remember like a lot of mental health resources that the school that I went to, the college I went to, there was also like a number of resources just for like kind of de-stressing activities. Like, they had like egg chairs or like massage rooms or stuff like that, like calming rooms, meditation sessions, that kind of thing. Which, like I said before, like isn't necessarily enough, but like it helps if you're just really stressed and maybe not to that burnout stage yet. For me specifically, what helped to like get to the point that I was like, okay, like I'm going to reach out to a therapist, which is a tough thing to do because you're like acknowledging like I I can't do it on my own, and that's like a tough thing to admit to yourself, especially when you're kind of in that mood of like not being in a good like mental health space, because then you have so much like self-doubt and so many like negative thoughts going around in your mind that are telling you like you can't do it. Like for me, it was like, oh, like I'm pathetic, I'm weak, I'm ugly, I'm all these things, and like you can't really get yourself to do very much. And one of the things that was actually really helpful for me specifically was like the mental health initiative, go SASE mental health initiative. Like me being in that group and people that were very like positive, very like promoting positive mental health activities kind of helped me, like was like an accountability buddy for me to be like, okay, like I like said, like I'm thinking about therapy. And then like the next meetings I'd be like, oh, like I did something. I actually like made a step. Like I looked up a therapist online, and the next one's like, oh, I sent him an email. And there's a lot of like different kinds of friends you can have. Like there's friends that you have that you like go out with or like have fun with, or like there's friends that you'll like have classes with and you'll study with, and there's friends that are going to be your emotional support group, right? And finding friends that you feel comfortable being emotionally vulnerable with are the friends that you're probably going to be that are the most important to you. And if you can like get yourself to admit it to them, then they're going to support you and they're going to help you on your own journey to help yourself, take those steps to better your mental health. And if you can't afford like mental health services like therapy, I know that can often be expensive, and there's a lot of insurances that don't necessarily cover that. Finding that like emotional support friend, like you don't want to like burden them, but when they're your friend, like they're going to be uplifted by being able to help you. And it's less of you being a burden and more of them enjoying helping their friend. And having that idea click in your mind helps you to be a little bit more emotionally vulnerable and ask for help. And your friends are the people that are going to want to help you do that. So, and if it doesn't work out with the friend you asked, then maybe you didn't have the right friend. So that could be a sign too. Friends are your first therapists.
I was curious to know more about with both you and Aish, like how the reaction has been like with your family. So for Alex, for you, like were you finding that support system like with your family? Have they been like supporting? And then for Aish too, I wanted to ask if your parents' perspective on like mental health issues like burnout has changed now that you have been going through and learning like more about ways to address it versus what you're saying with just like being in tune with like your spiritual like self.
Yeah, so obviously there's like a difference, like just kind of generation to generation, and I guess even more specifically, like the last 2 years where mental health awareness has gone up a ton. Yes, there's generational differences in how people see mental health. My parents were very positive. I have a very good relationship with my parents, and I'm pretty sure that they knew before me that I was depressed. Like I was living at home and they were worried about me, and like they helped me a lot with getting myself to be okay with asking for help, because they were kind of asking if I need to help, right? And I would be like, no, 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 no. And then yes, right? So that was a tough journey. And yeah, I had very emotionally supportive parents. There's a lot of things that are just between me and my therapist. Like I did a lot of it, pretty much my whole healing journey on my own, but they definitely helped me to address that I wasn't okay and to admit it to myself that I needed to reach out to someone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, my parents have always been pretty supportive in the sense of, hey, are you doing okay? And things like that. I know that in high school, my dad was convinced that I was depressed. And I might have been, I might have not been. I don't really know. But I was the one kind of brushing it off. And eventually, like, my dad kept pushing me to, and I was like, I really don't want to. And only then did he kind of back off. But I think he's always been supportive of me going and getting things checked out. And my mom is always just, my mom is a lot more like she feels things. I feel like she's very typical, like mom. You know how moms want their kids to be okay. Like she's that kind of person. She's very caring and sweet. And so I feel like no matter what, my mom has always been supportive. And I think my dad, as I've gotten older and as I'm in college and more stressed out, he's a lot more understanding. And I think he realizes how much pressure I put on myself because I think once I came to college, my parents realized that most of the stuff that I do isn't because they're pressuring me. I've just pressured myself into it. And so I feel like my dad is a lot more supportive. My mom's always been supportive. And I think that overall, they're okay with me doing whatever I need to, but I personally don't feel like broaching the topic of, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. But that's just because I don't feel like broaching the topic with myself entirely yet. So I don't want to bring other people into it as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I just really appreciate that you guys were open to sharing, like I said before in the beginning of the episode, just sharing kind of your journey and what you've noticed and what you've learned, and hopefully just really helpful for other people who may be listening, either to spark them to like look into more resources or just have another person that they could hopefully reach out to maybe, or maybe prompt them to go to the mental health awareness meetings or seeing those resources there. But something that we like to do on the adult table too is to get to know our guests just like personally as well. So I'm glad we were able to kind of talk a lot about the mental health topic. And I know there's plenty more that we could talk about, but we also want to get to know you guys more as people, as our guests here. Typically, what we do is we kind of have like a rapid fire round of questions for you guys, kind of just like random questions, just kind of miscellaneous topics that we have. Just jumping off with rapid fire, can you guys mention like something that kind of made you really happy recently?
I learned how to ride a box and a pipe on a snowboard, and it was my second day on riding park.
Yesterday, I finished my homework early and I played Hades and I killed Hades.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Next question is favorite thing to do to recharge after a work day or a school day?
I love my bed. That's all.
Like just to lay down in it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the squishmallows.
Yes. All of those.
I would say music, finding new music, or like specifically finding new music from like a playlist I have with my friends.
That's fun.
Spotify blends. Yeah.
I love sharing music. Yeah, it's a good one.
Nice. Okay, this question is pointed towards Aish because I know you watch so much Shark Tank. We talk about it a lot. All right, for the listeners, what is a must-watch Shark Tank pitch that comes to mind to you?
Season 1, episode 1 pilot, because there's so many crazy ideas. I don't know if you remember this, Jason, but like one of the first pitches is an implantable
That thing's
Bluetooth.
freaking so creepy.
Yeah, that's crazy. So like the whole pitch is like this guy shows up and he's like, you can implant it like in your ear canal, and then like they're like, okay, so what do you do to charge it? And he's like, you just plug yourself in when you go to bed, and like you have to do like software updates, and if there's like old tech, you like take it out and then put a new one in. So that's crazy. But then I guess the other one, just like really quickly, is I really like Love Pop. They do 3D laser cut out cards.
Yeah.
And I have one and I love buying them for my friends and I think they're really cool. But that's like my fun one.
Wait, that one is insane. I didn't even, that looks like literally just like a plant, not even a
Yeah,
car.
and it like folds up. I've had it open for years, so I don't like actually know how to close it.
Wow,
No, they're
that's
awesome. They have like
crazy.
themes for everything, like Disney
Yeah.
stuff or like Marvel stuff and everything. I love those.
Next question is for both of you, your favorite comfort foods?
Chicken katsu. Chicken katsu.
Okay.
Did I make myself? Yeah.
Ooh.
I like mac and cheese. Specifically Jason's Deli mac and cheese. Like it's Kraft mac and cheese, but like it just hits different.
Oh, I don't
Wait,
think
is
I've
that a
heard of
brand of like instant mac and cheese, or is that from a store?
They're like a little store, like a little restaurant vibe.
Oh, I
Maybe
see.
it's a Texas thing. I don't know.
Because when you said Jason, I was like, "This Jason?
Yeah,
Like
it's
this specific mac and cheese that Jason makes?"
Yeah, since August of 2022, Jason's Deli mac and cheese.
Okay.
It was weird because I literally had mac and cheese for dinner, and you said that, and I was like, where's this going here? Um, okay, next I asked a question specific for question specific for Alex. I know you mentioned that one of the things that you like to do now are like dinner parties. So do you have like a go-to conversation starter or like a question to like start up the conversation there?
I'm not usually the person that does that. I'm really good at having conversations if it's like one-on-one or like three, maybe four people. If there's more than four people, I listen. I don't do well at starting conversations.
So people
I
start the
don't have an
conversation
answer
with
to that.
you. Well, like how?
Yeah,
What's your favorite
I
one that
would
someone has come up to you to say? To start with you.
I love it when people come at me with like completely out of pocket things. Like chaotic personality person, like I don't know. It's tough to think of example because my mind doesn't really work that way. I wish it did. I wish it did. But like someone like out of nowhere just says like something super weird or like a weird question, like they're thinking about something ridiculous. And then like that becomes a whole conversation because it's like all of a sudden the most interesting ever. Cause like why would you ever think of that? And like how did your mind even go there? I just love it when stuff like that happens. Yeah.
In your next dinner party, you should ask them if they were in the purge, if they would kill someone and who.
Ooh.
Okay. How would you answer that yourself?
I would kill someone. It just like depends on my mood. See, because there's like three people, right? There's either the people that try to go out and survive, and like then there's the people that want to like rob a bank and get rich. That's Aaron, which is like stupid because you're gonna get killed. And then there's the people that like go into hiding to survive. I personally like I'm gonna go try to kill someone, and then like if I die along the way, like okay, cool, whatever.
Yeah, I'd be going to hiding.
Yeah, I would go into hiding as well.
Definitely hiding too. Grab as much food as you can and just sit there. Yeah, when you said who, I thought you were like, oh, if now I can kill someone, I'm gonna kill like Aaron and Ronak or something. I thought that's what you're gonna
Last time I had this conversation, I said I was gonna kill Ronik. So yeah, like it happens.
classic. We'll see if Ronak keeps that adapted.
Okay. Next question is, what is your self-care routine if you have one?
Emotionally or like skincare? What do you mean? Like,
Well, like,
like
I feel like some people have like, like if they're doing like a self-care day, they like have certain things that they like doing. Skincare could be one of those, but it's not like a 5-step like process, Like it's like, oh, like what are certain things that you have that maybe you like you habitually go back to that you like having as part of your, process.
I think I have two very opposite types of like self-care days.
Okay.
One is where I'd really focus on intentional thought, and the other is where I would completely turn off my mind.
Mm.
Like for me, my most like my best type of like emotional rest day is going snowboarding by myself, listening to music because my mind's off the whole day. Like that's zone out. That's complete zone out for me. So yeah.
I guess for me, I like to watch TV and I like to just rewatch stuff. So either I'm watching something crazy off of Shark Tank, it's unhealthy, or my favorite TV show ever it's called Person of Interest, and it's by like Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan, the brothers. So I really like that show, so I'll like watch something. And I also like to lay down and stare at my wall. Like that's it. So yeah.
Nice.
Are like the lights on or off?
it doesn't really matter, but I like to see like the shapes on my wall, and then I'll just kind of think.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay, awesome. I think that's like all the time that we have, unfortunately, just for our rapid fire. We do like to wrap up our episodes with one last question. I know we kind of keep going back to these classics, but in the theme of our podcast, what is one thing you did recently that made you feel like a real adult, or one adult thing that you wish you knew sooner?
I guess I have like two things for making myself feel like an adult. I'm going to California this summer and I planned out the entire drive without my parents' help. And I feel like normally like they would plan everything and book hotel rooms. So I did that. So I felt like a big girl. And then my other thing is just going back to stress and things like that. Who cares? Nothing really matters. So think about from 20 years from now, if you're stressed about something, think about if you'll remember it in 20 years. You probably won't. So don't even stress out. Yeah.
I like that.
Nice.
Nihilism.
You
Yeah,
can still put it after.
exactly.
Optimistic nihilism.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Well,
There's this one guy on TikTok who just always talks about that, like nothing matters. He'll just like record himself on the street and he's just like, none of this matters. You're putting too much pressure. I could do whatever on the street. I could do this. This person's gonna forget about me in like 2 seconds, and I'm just gonna keep doing life and just be fulfilled. I'm like, damn. That like
And
Dancing
if they
through the
do
grocery
remember,
store
it'll be
aisles.
like a fun little story for them.
yeah.
true.
So Alex, I know you already answered last month, so hopefully you got another answer for us for something else.
I'll reiterate one of my answers from last time. Understand how you as an individual value things, people, and yourself. Because most people don't know how to answer that question, and I find that incredibly important to living a fulfilled life.
Just love it.
Well, thank you, Aisha and Alex, for coming on the Adult Table podcast. Do you guys have any like socials or I guess things to plug for the SASE Mental Health Initiative where listeners can find and connect with you?
SASE Mental Health Initiative. Our Instagram is SASE Mental Health. For the month of May, Mental Health Awareness Month, we'll be posting some stuff on our stories that's like trying to get people engaged online and trying to get them to practice some positive mental health activities. So I think we'll do like some bingo boards or something like that. We'll have like a little activity on each square and you can like tag people and like make people do positive mental health things with you. So check that out. It'll be really fun. Oh, and my Instagram is Alex Hattori44. Yay.
Yay. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. So just like do a little stalking and you'll get to me.
Okay, we'll tag you.
We'll tag you. But yeah, for the listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our Instagram so you know when episodes come out. Follow us on our Instagram at the Adult Table Podcast for updates. I'm Jason Chin.
And I'm Jenny Chung, and we'll see you next time at the Adult Table. Thanks for listening.